Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to my new video where we are going to be going over my top 5 most underrated items that you should take a second look at. Now, the reason why I created this video is because of Season 10 and what happened in it and how overpowered things weren't really discovered until later into the season. I'm trying to get a jump start and taking a second look at some of the lesser used items. Now, if you need an example from Season 10, things like Presence of Mind wasn't really discovered. Things like Nimbus Cloak were really not nerfed until really late into Season 10. And then Leandre's really started becoming extremely popular, with even things like Gangplank that you wouldn't think would use it start using it in later in Season 10. Now, I put timestamps at every single point in my video. They're going to be up at the top if you want to skip this intro, or if you want to skip a particular tip where I'm going and covering over a certain item that you already have a really good understanding of and you might already be using yourself. Now, with all these videos, I'm only covering 5 items, so if you have a really sleeper OP build, I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. So with all that out of the way, let's get into tip number 1. Alright, and getting into item number 1, the first mythic that we are going to cover, and that is going to be Divine Sunderer. Now, what really caught my overall attention with this item is its mythic passive distribution is very, very unique, giving you both 5% of armor penetration and magic penetration. So it's going to have a very good, strong base for champions that have mixed damage types. Now, I think this is going to be one of the best items possible that champions like Gangplank can really utilize, because first of all, it has a Spellblade. Spellblades are extremely powerful in the game because they can be procced on things like a Gangplank Q, an Ezreal Q, anything that is just applies on hit effects. This can be an extremely strong item. Now, if you can see here with the 5% armor and 5% magic, if you look at similar mythic items that are coming out of Assassins, they only give 4% armor penetration per item. So this is giving a huge amount more of percentage penetration coming out of it. It is an extremely well statted item with attack damage, health, ability haste, and it gives you a little bit of offense and defensive, so it can be extremely strong for champions that are looking to get a little bit more tanky and that both can utilize the armor penetration and the magic penetration. Hit me up with your thoughts down below. I think this is a really underutilized item and it's going to start becoming extremely popular, and I think that the mythic passive currently right now is highly underrated. And that will wrap up tip number 1. Alright, and we are going to be jumping into the second item that I very rarely see utilized, and that is the Cosmic Drive. Your just overall ability to kite out and have a big movement speed differential is going to be extremely important in particular matchups. So this is going to be a little bit situational, but if you are playing champions like Cassiopeia, mid-range mages in particular, Cassiopeia, Victor, Vladimir, Ryze, they heavily rely on being able to get in and out of combat and get out of the way of really strong abilities that might be coming at you, and then being able to chase people down and throw them out. It also, again, it is very well statted with ability power, health, and ability haste, giving you a bit of defensive and offensive, which I think is really great. So if you are really a mechanically blessed player and you think that you can take full advantage of the overall movement speed that is granted by this and making a difference in team fights, just getting that little bit of extra movement speed to get into a good position, I highly recommend that you check out Cosmic Drive. Again, on mid-range mages, this is absolutely an insane ability, as well as assassins that might be looking to close the distance a bit. Things like Diana or Fizz can utilize this quite well, and that will wrap up tip number 2. Alright, and getting into the next item that I think is extremely strong, particularly for supports because of its stat distribution, giving you mana regen, ability haste, 200 health, and 40 ability power, with a great mythic passive for support champions, particularly shielding champions that can take full advantage of their decent AP scalings on their shields. Now, what it does is it gives you a extra 100 damage whenever you slow or immobilize the enemy target. Now, this is really dependent on your level, so it's going to do a little bit less. When you first get it, it's going to be doing about 60, and when you are at a max level, it's going to be doing a about 100. Now, if this really comes down to the particular champion you're using, now, if you're a champion that can slow a lot of targets in a team fight, maybe you're doing something like a wombo combo, maybe something with a root, maybe something like a Seraphine, maybe something like a Zyra. If you hit a large bulk of the enemy team, it is going to provide you in late game fights with around 400 to 500 damage, which is absolutely insane for coming out of the support role to be able to do this on a very spammable basis, only having a 6-second cooldown on the enemies. Now, it's also going to provide, if your allies are proccing it as well, they can do up to an extra 500 damage. So if you're thinking about a late game team fight, say you get a big wombo combo, you hit all 5 with your slowing or your immobilizing effect, and your allies are detonating, you can potentially add up to 1,000 extra damage in a team fight just from a item alone. Not to mention that this gives a great amount of movement speed as well per the detonation mark, so you could potentially be giving up to 5 different people movement speed increases, as well as doing up to 1,000 damage. Now, obviously, this is going to be mitigated because it is magic damage. Magic resistance will cut that down, but the ability to just get this amount of pure damage and utility out of an item is really unparalleled from the support role, as well as being one of the cheapest mythic items in the game. I think this is a highly underrated mythic item that I think you guys should really take a second look at if you are in that role. Now, champions that can do really well with this are things like Janna, things like Karma. If you want to really test the limits of this, something like an Ashe support where you can just spam volley and really just set up those marks on everyone can be good. And with the great mythic passive giving you a little bit more ability power, I think this is a can't miss support item that, in my opinion, probably is going to get nerfed at some point. And that will wrap up this tip. Alright, and getting into the fourth tip, I know it is a little bit risky, but I think that Mage Soulstealer is a great item, and you only lose 70% of the total cost if you have to end up selling it because you are getting consistently killed in the team fights. But its stat allocation is really nice, giving you a little bit of extra bonus health and ability power for a very cheap total sum of 1,600 gold. And the best part of this is it's considered a completed legendary item, so it gives you a stack of your current mythic passive bonuses for very cheap. So this is a great way to spend a mid-range amount of gold to get a very strong power spike with your current mythic passive and a decent amount of ability power and health. If you don't know how it works, is Glory, gain 4 stacks for a champion killed, 2 stacks for an assist, up to a total of 25 stacks, lose 10 stacks on death, grant 5 ability power per stack of Glory, and gain 10% movement speed. So it's a great both offensive and defensive item, giving you movement speed to be able to get away, a little bit of extra health to survive burst, as well as a very large sum of ability power can come out of this. So always look to do a Mage Soulstealer if you are on a particularly safe champion. Ones that come to mind are things like Xerath and things like Janna, and this is just such a great cheap power spike, particularly for AP supports, that they can look to utilize, particularly with champions like Brand that really go for more expensive mythic items, but they do have very strong mythic passives. If they are looking at that, you can get an extra 5 ability haste, very cheap, and you can get an extra bit of magic pen. If you're playing something like Zyra and you're going Luden's Tempest, this can just be a great overall buy. So do not bypass the Mage Soulstealer when you are on a safe champion in a particularly good game. And that will wrap up my tip. Alright, and getting into the final item, and after we cover this one, I'm going to do an honorable mention. Now, Gargoyle's Stoneplate is extremely strong. If you don't know, it's changed a little bit. It doesn't give you the extra max health. It gives you a huge shield that is based on your overall max health. It scales with that. So really heavy HP builds can provide you with just an enormous amount of burst prevention. If you want to see how big it is with just kind of a basic HP build, this is not too much. This is with 4.4 k HP health. It is just absolutely insane the amount of damage prevention that can come out of Gargoyle's Stoneplate. Now, it is a bit situational. It is extremely good against enemy team comps with a lot of burst damage. Things like Elise, things like Fizz, things like lethality bot lanes, things like a lethality Varus, where you can just really stop a lot of burst that's coming your way, and then they're not going to have too much damage afterwards. So always look for the Gargoyle's Stoneplate in those particular situations. It will pay a huge amount of dividends. And also its build path is very nice. It's always, you should always be able to pick up one of these items on your different backs because it is very cheap. It has an Aegis of the Legion, so you're able to get a little bit of early ability haste, and you can kind of pick and choose. If, hey, I'm in an AD matchup, I really need a bit of armor, you can just look to pick up the 2 cloth armors and then get the null magic a little bit later when you're facing the APs in different team fights. So do not overlook Gargoyle's Stoneplate. I think it is a little bit better in different situations. It is just going to be a great item to pick up if you are playing a tanky champion. Now, I was talking a little bit about a honorable mention. My honorable mention is the Black Cleaver, but you're probably like, hey, Lulfit, this is a very common item a lot of people use, but I think that it should start being used by a few new champions. Now, obviously, it's still going to be really good on things like Kled, things like Darius, even assassins like Talon, because of this new passive Carve. Doing physical damage to a champion applies a 4% armor reduction up to 24%, and then now it does Butcher. Damaging abilities and attacks on hit against fully shredded targets do an additional 5% missing health physical damage. So what this means is it's an execute in a way. If they have 95% of their health missing and you're doing 5% of that 95% HP, it is going to be a lot stronger than maybe a base of like a 9 or a 10% of current health that the Blade of the Rune King will provide. So things like Darius, things like Urgot are going to really need this item because they have executes in their kit. And it is also applied on dot damage. As you can see at the bottom, damage over time deals 40% carve damage. So things like Talon, things like Darius are going to just get an insane power spike when they pick up the Black Cleaver. So do not underestimate this item. I know it is rather expensive at 3,300, but the Bruiser build usually is pretty expensive, let's be honest. So look to try out Black Cleaver in different situations. I've found a little bit of success even using it on my Senna builds. So give it a try if you're playing any AD champions. It has a nice stat allocation of extra health, attack damage, and ability haste. That will wrap up my video, guys. If you have any fun, cool new builds, let me know in the comments down below. And as always, guys, take it easy.